President Trump made those comments about not needing trade deals during a meeting with Canada's new Prime Minister. Mark Carney arrived at the White House yesterday, where he and the president discussed tariffs as well as Trump's push to annex Canada.
Mr. President, you have said that Canada should become the 51st state.
No. Well, I still believe that, but you know, it takes two to tango, right? But no, I do. I mean, I believe it would be a massive tax cut for the Canadian citizens. You get free military, you get tremendous medical cares and other things. There would be a lot of advantages.
Well, if I may, as you know from real estate, there are some places that are never for sale.
That's true.
We're sitting in one right now, you know, Buckingham Palace that you visited as well.
That's true.
And having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale ever. But the opportunity is in the partnership and what we can build together. And we have done that in the past.
They have, I must say, Canada is stepping up the military participation because Mark knew, you know, they were low and now they're stepping it up. And that's a very important thing. But never say never. Never say never.
What? Is there anything he could say to you in the course of your meetings with him today that would get you to lift tariffs on Canada?
No.
Why not?
Just the way it is. See, the conflict is, and this is very friendly. We're not. This is not going to be like we had another little blow up with somebody else. That was a much different. This is a very friendly conversation. But we want to make our own cars. We don't really want cars from Canada, and we put tariffs on cars from Canada. And at a certain point, it won't make economic sense for Canada to build those cars.
So, J. Mart, I think this meeting that happened at the White House absolutely fascinating. There was, you know what, nothing triggering about it because Mark Carney, Trump's equal, some would argue even more so, knows how to handle situations like this, being in the finance industry,
Sure.
being extremely well-versed in leadership.
Right.
A leader doesn't get triggered. A leader doesn't get meltdown at a comment he doesn't like. There were many comments there that Donald Trump was making that Mark Carney 100% wholeheartedly disagrees with and knows will never happen. He did not embarrass the president. At the same time, he very calmly and affably said no.
He brought a well-conceived, pre-cooked, but well-delivered line with him, Mika, which is, as you know from real estate, Mr. President, playing on the president's history, and said some places are never for sale, including this building we're in right now, which, by the way, Trump rarely laughs, and he even chuckled at that, which tells you it was a pretty good line. So, look, I thought Carney did what he had to do. He was firm in saying Canada is not for sale. He invoked the voters of his country who just elected him as the de facto board of directors, saying his country is not for sale. But, Mika, this is classic Trump. You guys know this. In person, when Trump is face-to-face with somebody, he wants to win them over. He's not going to have a confrontation with Carney in the Oval Office. He wants Carney to be his friend. And that's why it was so affable, because Trump is never going to get into a tit-for-tat with somebody. Almost never. I think there's a different case with Zelensky, but Trump in person is constantly, it could be Gavin Newsom, Vladimir Putin, or Mark Carney. He wants to win that person over, and that's the Trump that you saw yesterday with Mark Carney in the Oval Office. And Carney, to his credit, didn't give Trump a reason not to try to, you know, persuade him.
Yet.
Donald Trump said 2 weeks ago that Donald Trump was meeting with China. We're meeting with China. Those were his exact words. The Treasury Secretary today said, no, that's not true at all. Not one word has been spoken to China. None of us are meeting with China. The president wasn't telling the truth. That's what the Treasury Secretary told Congress. So there's Donald Trump's Treasury Secretary humiliating Donald Trump today and knowing he can get away with it because he has seen Donald Trump up close this year. And he probably knows that the Donald Trump who is now mired in the 25th day of the art of no deals is not spending his day watching the Treasury Secretary testify about Donald Trump to a House committee. No. Donald Trump spent some of his day with the electorally victorious new Prime Minister of Canada, who won an election that was fueled by Canadian voter intense opposition, is the kindest word to put on it, opposition to Donald Trump. The very first president of the United States to actually offer himself as a candidate for Canadians to vote for on Election Day in a social media burst of Trumpian constitutional dementia. You're about to see the video of Donald Trump achieving the art of no deals once again today in his utterly demented attempt, this time on TV, to make Canada the 51st state. What you are about to see is the President of the United States, who sounds like he is out of his mind, sitting beside a real head of state who obviously, though he must have expected it, still can't really believe what he's hearing in the Oval Office. And you will watch how the Canadian Prime Minister says absolutely no to Donald Trump to his face, with Donald Trump far too exhausted at this point to try to interrupt the way he did when Ukraine's President Zelensky was sitting beside him in the Oval Office. Things have gone very badly for Donald Trump every day since President Zelensky was in the Oval Office. And Donald Trump had no fight in him today when the very polite Canadian beside him talked rings around Donald Trump like a ringmaster in a circus with a trained animal, threw in some magic words that sounded flattering enough to Donald Trump so that Donald Trump actually, and you'll see this, ends up nodding and agreeing with the man who is humiliating him and defeating him right there in the room on TV. The first thing you will hear Donald Trump say after the Canadian Prime Minister has humiliated him is, "That's true." That's what Trump says. No president has ever lost more in one conversation in the Oval Office than Donald Trump lost in these 90 seconds.
I'm a very artistic person, but when I looked at that beauty, I said, that's the way it was meant to be. But, you know, it's, I do feel it's much better for Canada. But we're not going to be discussing that unless somebody wants to discuss it. I think that there are tremendous benefits to the Canadian citizens, tremendously lower taxes, free military, which honestly we give you essentially anyway because we're protecting Canada if you ever had a problem. But I think it would really be a wonderful marriage because it's two places that get along very well. They like each other a lot.
Well, if I may, as you know from real estate, there are some places that are never for sale.
That's true.
We're sitting in one right now, you know, Buckingham Palace that you visited as well.
That's true.
And having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale ever. But the opportunity is in the partnership and what we can build together. And we have done that in the past. And part of that, as the president just said, is with respect to our own security. And my government is committed for a step change in our investment in Canadian security and our partnership. And I'll say this as well, that the president has revitalized international security, revitalized NATO, and us playing our full weight in NATO.
Kind of sad. The old guy slumped forward in his bad posture, the Canadian sitting up, the Canadian talking rings around him. Prime Minister Mark Carney, you can see, thinking of mind racing while Donald Trump's saying these insane things. And then finally, when the Prime Minister gets his shot, could not be more calm. And Donald Trump doesn't even understand what's happening on the Canadian side of that conversation. The other deal Donald Trump failed to make right there in that room on TV was a trade deal with Canada which Donald Trump has been promising all year. Now, to make a new trade deal with Canada, Donald Trump will have to legally amend, through a vote in Congress, the trade deal that he already has with Canada, that his administration negotiated in the first Trump presidency. That was the rewrite of the North American Free Trade Agreement, which Donald Trump signed into law in 2018. That agreement, which Donald Trump signed into law, makes it legally impossible for Donald Trump to reach a trade agreement with Canada without also reaching a trade agreement with Mexico at the same time.
Are you optimistic? Can we make a deal with Canada?
I think it's really complex. I think this is really complex because they have been basically feeding off of us for decades upon decades upon decades, right?
Wrong. But what could possibly be the problem? The boss is in the room with the boss of Canada. Why couldn't the boss make a deal today? The Lutnicks in the Trump administration never said it's very complex. When they promised 90 deals in 90 days, Donald Trump is now refusing to do joint press conferences, the standard thing with visiting heads of state, because he does seem to have figured out exactly how much humiliation would be heaped upon him.
See, Canada is humiliating Trump. They're doing it just by not playing his game. And I think there are legitimate criticisms you could make saying, well, in certain moments, they need to stand up stronger to Trump. I do think that. I think there were certain moments where Trump was attacking other Canadian leaders. Carney maybe should have spoken up, not to defend himself, but to defend other people. Like Trump was attacking, women who have been high-level government officials in Canada, and maybe he should have said something, that maybe Carney should have been a little bit more forceful. Like, Trump's a fascist, and if we agree with that, we don't want to act like the people in the 1930s did, politely smiling next to fascists. There's legitimate criticisms to make. But the reality is he played the game by simply letting Trump hang himself. He mostly did that. And that is generally the best strategy. You go in there, you let Trump hang himself. You let Trump look like the idiot he is. You let Trump demonstrate to the world that he is the unhinged one and that he personally is unhinged and therefore largely the policies that he's pushing, whether the tariffs or the annexation or what have you, are unhinged as well. There's no logic here beyond ego, beyond like childish dreams of a map looking cooler. There's nothing else there. And so that gives the rest of the world confidence. Like Canada can say, we went in there and while it wasn't perfect, he did a darn good job of exposing Trump. That's all you really need to do. Now the world has seen it. It's like, different tones work. I think Zelensky, what he did was the correct tone for his country. Both Zelensky and Carney in their own way exposed Trump.